Yeah, Beth just started the video here. She's going to join me on the bench here.
Hello.
And that we've had a lot of questions about each other from our viewers and that, so we decided to do a video of who are Beth and Phil. So to kind of give you a background in that of where we came from and basically how this whole thing started and wound up in the Philippines here. Uh, and that, so I'll kind of start out here so I can give Beth a chance to kind of put her thoughts together and that. So my name is Philip Metzler. I was born and raised in the United States, in the state of Wisconsin, which is in the northern part, the north central part of the United States. Grew up and spent my childhood in a little farming town there in the center of the state. Went to college at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. I majored in psychology and minored in history. From there, I attended a theological seminary for 2 years, and that majoring in theology and counseling. I decided at that time, after so much schooling, 6 years beyond high school, to take a break. Well, that break lasted the rest of my life here. I never went back to school and that. My hobby at the time was electronics, so I actually started as a service repair person in electronics, repairing televisions, TVs, radios, pinball machines, pool tables, you name it, all the video games at that time in the 70s and 80s. Spent 10 years actually doing that. The last part of it I actually taught in a trade school, electronics, as a basic course there for about a year and a half. From there, I spent time in the military, went into the U.S. Navy, and that was trained as a nav tech in charge of navigation on board nuclear submarines, and spent a year and a half on board the nuclear submarines punching holes in the North Atlantic when we were in the Cold War against Russia and that. And of course we carried nuclear weapons at the time and that as a deterrent for Russia. And that was approximately, I got to think now, late 70s, early 80s and that. So, and was honorably discharged from the Navy. At that point, didn't really know what I was going to do. It was hard for me to go back into electronics and that. So on a whim from a friend of mine who informed me, why don't you just drive truck? And that, so I went out and went to school, learned how to drive semis, the big 18-wheelers, and that, and spent the next 16 years driving semi. I kind of tell people, if there's a town above 5,000 in the contiguous United States, the 48 states, I've probably been in it over the course of those 16 years. The last few years of that, I had dedicated runs and that going to the Northwest and to the West Coast. I've got to know LA so well, I really didn't even need to pull out a map anymore, which when I think back upon it, it's kind of disgusting in that. But 3 million miles accident-free later and that, I decided to get out of that and actually hauled trailers out of Indiana, delivering trailers all over the country, and did that for 2 to 3 years. In 2000, I moved to Montana. I had bought in 1996 20 acres in Montana, halfway between Great Falls and Helena, and that about 3 miles off the main road off the Missouri River in there. And in 2000 decided to go there and live. And for the next 10 years, I basically built a cabin, did everything, no electricity, no running water, So even back then, I really didn't live a Western lifestyle at all, and that. And also at the same time, I worked in Great Falls. I didn't have the financial means to not be able to work, so I spent my weeks working in Great Falls, my weekends and that at my place in the mountains and completing the building there. And that's kind of how I learned to do a lot of different things. And I used to call myself a joder, a jack of all trades organizer, because that's basically what my life had seemed to be centered around in that. In 2010, I retired. At the very beginning of 2010, I retired, actually retired earlier. I was on unemployment compensation for half the year before and that. And during that time, I moved to Silver City, New Mexico, and that decided to retire down there. And in the process of that retirement and that and trying to find somebody and that, I met Beth on the internet. And we'll have to run a later video on what brought me to ever consider the Philippines as a place I'd want to live. And I tell people that if I had known, if you had told me 2 months before that I met Beth and came to the Philippines that I would move here someday, I'd have told you I barely knew where it was. And I really never heard of any place but Manila. And so when I first heard of Cebu and that, I really had to look everything up on a map to be able to see exactly where it was and that. So that's kind of a short synopsis of my life and that. And in another video, I'll have to give you the details of whatever brought me here to the Philippines, because it's a long story, and Beth is only really a part of that story. And that. So I'll kind of turn it over to her, and she can kind of give you a short history of where she was born and raised and went to school, and her work history and that. So Beth, take it from here.
Yeah. Hello everybody, I'm Annie Beth. My name is Annie Beth, then my nickname is Beth. So when I was a high school before, I was studied at the, what do you call that one, darling? A school for the kids that their parents that cannot send to school, a private school in Cebu. So I studied there for 4 years, and after that, that's a private school, and after that
and that's where you learned English, right?
Yeah. And then there we live, my God, for once a year only we can go home at home. Then only 1 week we stay at home, then come back to Cebu. Then that school is a free education. And then what else?
Yeah, I put her on the spot here. And that the school is in Talisay. It's a Catholic school, and that, and she had the opportunity, and through her family, because she actually grew up in Bukidnon in Mindanao, in a small little town there off the main road, and it's still kind of off the main road and that, but she was able to come to Cebu and to Talisay there and go to school. And one thing really good about the school was they forced the students not to speak their native language, was Bisaya, and got demerits for speaking Bisaya in order that they learned English. Because when I first met Beth, I was surprised at how good her English was, and thank heavens to the priest and the nuns there that they set up an education that allowed these the students to get really ahead of the ball game. After that, when she graduated,
when I graduated, the student listened to the best factory. Then we worked there. And then for the first month, the nuns they will be the one to supply our food. Then after that one, that's free. Then after that one, we decided our salary is our own. Then then I work at the electronics company for 1 year. Then after that one we lay off, and I after that I applied to another factory in Maps. Then there where I work for 12 years. That's a garments factory export, and that's the time that I met that's the time that I met Philip. I worked there for 12 years, then after that one I resigned.
Yeah, MEPS is on the island of Lapu-Lapu, which is
In
just
Mactan.
across the bridge from Cebu. And when I first came here, we lived in Mactan, which is kind of a suburb of Lapu-Lapu, but they have a huge industrial park there called MEPS. And that's where she worked for a period of time as a seamstress, making clothes.
Yeah.
And many Americans will recognize this J. Crew.
Jacob.
So the tops that you buy with the label J. Crew on were made at the factory that she worked with for such a long period of time, and that. So that kind of gives you a background of where we were and what brought us together. And that during that time she saved money, bought a computer, got online, and started looking for somebody and actually put a profile of herself up there. In the meantime, I'm back in the States. I went living in Silver City in my trailer and that, and she's checking just to make sure
That's
everything's
okay.
running okay here and that. And bought a computer also and got online looking for somebody. And we'll kind of cut it off here because it's kind of a long story of why I decided to, at my stage of the ball game, that I didn't want to be alone anymore. Because when I lived in the mountains in Montana and that, like I said, I built my own cabin back in the mountains, and I intended, for all practical purposes, to die there and be buried there, and had become accustomed after divorce and that to that kind of a life, and I was real happy with living by myself, and so I really had no inclination to look for anybody. And within a few months, that completely changed. And like I said, that's a different story, which we'll have to sit down again in a couple days and relay that story, because it's pretty interesting. And that's what really brought us together and started what we now call Philippine Expat Country Living and Philippine Expat Garden and Farm. So, yeah, thanks for viewing. If you have any comments or any questions,
I wanna show. I wanna make a video for my life before next video.
oh, I see. So we'll say goodbye for now.
Yeah.
And we'll hopefully get this uploaded real soon and that. So stay tuned. There'll be more coming. And thank you so much for viewing our videos and being a part of our life as we live and grow here in the Philippines. Thank you.
Bye bye.